January 1st, 1918. Presbyterian Hospital in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. A woman has traveled from the other side of Pennsylvania to give birth to an illegitimate son. This boy would soon be adopted by a couple in a town just outside of Philadelphia, renamed Robert Paul James, and would live his entire life with barely any knowledge of his birth parents. Over 100 years later, Robert's grandson, Max Miller, a well-known YouTuber and author, would finally learn the identity of Robert's birth parents when I traveled down to Phoenix to tell Max and his family in person.
I don't need DNA to say, oh yeah, that's Pop's mom.
Your great-grandmother.
That's my crap. I wish Daddy could have seen that.
Hello everybody, I am Jared Ross, the GeneaVlogger, and on today's video, I will be discussing the hidden ancestry of Max Miller's maternal grandfather. Last year, I released a video detailing Max Miller's maternal grandmother's ancestry, but there was still a really big question on his mother's side. Max's maternal grandfather, Robert Paul James. Robert had been adopted and no one knew the true names of his biological parents. At first, I turned to the DNA test that Max had originally taken, uploading it to various websites and trying different techniques to see if I could figure out Robert's ancestry. Looking through Max's DNA matches, nothing really stood out, and it seemed unlikely that we were going to solve this without further DNA testing and further research. I especially wanted to get Max's mother Pam to do a DNA test because that was going to give us the best results to uncover Robert's biological ancestry. So I turned to today's sponsor, MyHeritage. MyHeritage sent DNA tests to Max, his parents, and his siblings so we could finally unravel this mystery. MyHeritage offers DNA tests which come with a variety of advanced genetic genealogy tools which I used in helping uncover Max's ancestry. Using these advanced tools, such as shared match comparisons, it makes it much easier to find connections and discover the actual story of your ancestry. In the case of Max's family, these tools would become especially useful in confirming the identity of Robert's biological parents. MyHeritage also makes finding connections even easier by allowing users to connect their DNA results to their family tree to utilize the theory of family relativity. The theory of family relativity is a tool where MyHeritage cross-references the family tree connected to your DNA profile with the family trees of your DNA matches, which it then uses to hypothesize how you connect to your DNA matches. By utilizing all of these tools along with the over 20 billion records at MyHeritage, there is a lot that you can discover. Be sure to click the link below in the description so that you can order your DNA test today, and also use code MAX so that you can get a 30-day free trial membership to MyHeritage along with free shipping on your DNA test kit. After sending in their DNA test, as we waited to get the results, I spoke to Pam to get more information. I asked her what she knew about the story of her father's adoption and biological family, and she told me the following.
Well, I was told not much because it wasn't a particularly pleasant story. His father, his biological father, was a professor like at Oxford or something, and was engaged to be married to this woman. But he obviously really liked her sister. And so there was that scandal, and they sent her to America to have the baby. So that's really all, he didn't know much. In those days they just didn't share a lot of information, which is too bad.
Yeah.
But that's what I was told.
Anyone else want to add anything to that about what they've heard?
We have to
I only heard it from her.
Yeah, we have to trust what she makes
This
up.
is definitely a game of telephone.
Yeah, all of a sudden he was a professor at Oxford. The mom tells
I heard
it.
janitor. Right?
Pam sent me some items from her father, including a letter from Robert in which he mentions that his birth name was James Paul Cowling and that his mother was named Bertha Cowling. I sensed a little hesitancy from the family about whether they trusted the name Bertha Cowling to be correct, but it was a good start. I first looked at the Pennsylvania birth indexes for 1918 and found Robert listed as Cowling James P., son of Bertha Cowling, birth date January 1st, 1918, along with the birth certificate number. This all seemed to actually match up with what we had in the letter from Robert. So I went ahead and ordered the birth certificate, but these things sometimes take a while, so we were going to have to wait. I then looked for every Bertha Cowling alive at the time in America and England who would possibly fit the bill to be the biological mother of Max's grandfather. In my search, I only found one Bertha Cowling who seemed to even come close to fitting the bill. This Bertha had been born in Pennsylvania, with the 1900 census showing her living in Westmoreland, Pennsylvania, and the 1910 census showing her living in Rice County, Minnesota with her brothers. So she didn't seem to quite match up with the story Pam had told me, but based on everything else we had, she seemed to be the correct person. I then began to build out Bertha's tree to get a better idea of the family structure. As I was doing this, we got the DNA results back from MyHeritage, so I was able then to look through Pam's DNA matches to see if I could find anyone matching up to this tree I had just built for Bertha Cowling. I soon found a significant DNA match to Pam, who is actually a descendant of Annie Blanche Cowling, a sister to the Bertha Cowling I had identified, and the DNA match shared the exact amount of DNA we would expect for this distance of relation, confirming that this was the correct Bertha Cowling, who was Robert's biological mother. So I introduced her to the family. I found this match, this Miss Marla Maria Taylor, and she's sharing 78 centimorgans of DNA, which is about 1% of DNA. So you share about 1% with her. And looking at Marla's family tree, do you notice any names that pop out?
I don't know classes.
Annie Cowling.
Correct. Annie Blanche Cowling, born 1878 in St. Faith, Cornwall County, England, died 1949, Scottsdale, Pennsylvania. And how is she connected to this Bertha that we found? Well, they're sisters. Here we have that 1900 census again, Bertha in yellow, and two above her is Blanche. So we know for sure that this is your Bertha Cowling. So let's meet her.
That's cool.
She looks like my dad.
Is this the first time you've ever seen a photo
Yeah.
of her?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
even heard the name.
Yeah. Well, we did have that letter, but I think she looks like my dad.
I was gonna say, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't need DNA to say, oh yeah, that's Pop's mom.
Yeah.
Your great
It's
grandmother.
my grandma.
Bertha Amelia Cowling was born September 22nd, 1888 in Northumberland County, Pennsylvania. Bertha's parents were John Parsons Cowling and Mary Kay Stevens, who both came from small villages in Cornwall. John and Mary's first 4 children were all born in Trafalgar, Cornwall, and then the family moved to the United States in 1882, with Bertha being the first child born in the US. Bertha's father, John Parsons Cowling, worked as a reverend and was moving to various towns to work in different churches, so Bertha's childhood was spent all over the place, although largely in Pennsylvania. When Bertha was 6, the family moved to Berlin, Ontario, Canada, now known as Kitchener, Canada, where they would live for 3 years until 1897, when most of the family would move back to the United States. Bertha's sister, Mary Maud Cowling, would stay with her new husband in Ontario for a few years before they moved out west to Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. In 1907, Bertha and her younger brother, Robert Leroy, moved out to Kansas to go to Baker University. Bertha's older brother, Dr. Donald J. Cowling, a Yale graduate, was working as a professor at Baker University, so the 3 siblings all lived together along with Donald's wife, Elizabeth. In 1909, Dr. Donald J. Cowling would become the 3rd president of Carleton College and then move up to Northfield, Minnesota. Bertha and Robert Leroy would follow Donald to Carleton College so that they could finish out their degrees there. This was an absolutely amazing connection to find, especially considering how involved Max's family has been in education, something I'd even discussed in the first episode on Max's maternal grandmother's side. I would even learn that Bertha and all of her siblings would work in education at some point in their lives, most of the siblings spending their entire lives working in education. But when I found this connection to Carleton College, I had a bunch of questions, especially about Bertha's older brother, Dr. Donald J. Cowling. So I got in touch with the archivist at Carleton College, Eric Hilleman, who told me all about Dr. Cowling.
My name's Eric Hilleman. I have been archivist at Carleton College for functionally almost forever. I'm in my 35th year. I have lived with the records and history and personalities of associated with Carleton for more than half my life. So I'm happy to talk about Dr. Cowling. He was Carleton's third president and an extremely important one. He really is thought of as the builder of Carleton. The school at that time was just struggling to survive. Most colleges that were started in the 19th century actually went under. Our first president got us through that period of time and reached a point where the college was not in danger of folding and going under, but it was not particularly built up, didn't have much of an endowment, was not academically outstanding. Second president came in, also a Congregationalist minister, but unlike our first president, he came from a much more liberal theological tradition, had been educated at Yale, and changed a lot of things and got into a lot of trouble, actually, with the alumni of the school and the old guard faculty that had known a certain Carleton, and his personality didn't help all that much either. He was a bit of a martinet who just liked to declare this is the way things are going to be. And he wound up being damaged goods. And there was the first president actually stayed in town and was known to criticize his successor quite loudly to people, earning a reprimand from the Board of Trustees because the second president was actually carrying out the program that the trustees wanted him to. But he didn't stay very long. So he was here only 5 years. Then the college turned to Dr. Cowling, who shockingly was only 29 years old when he became a college president, which is unthinkable now. That is such a young age. He, like his immediate predecessor, was a Congregationalist minister who had been trained at Yale. There was a time, and it might even still be true, that Donald Cowling had more degrees from Yale University than any other person, postgraduate degrees from the school, including his Doctor of Divinity, but other things as well. He wound up following essentially the same program that his very controversial predecessor had, and everybody loved him. There had been a lot of dead wood cleared out with the faculty, actually, thanks to the introduction of Carnegie pensions by Andrew Carnegie that actually allowed college professors who never earned very much money in those days to retire comfortably. Up till then, they had to work until they dropped because they had no savings, they had no money. So in 1909, Dr. Cowling became Carleton's third president. He would stay in office for 36 years. As I think I said, he's really considered the builder of the school. In a very physical sense, there were 9 major buildings constructed while he was president, but in other senses as well. He took Carleton from being, sort of a backwater college that most people had not heard of out of the boundaries of our state, to a school that was very well respected and poised to become one of the top liberal arts colleges in the country. The transformation in the 36 years that he was president of that school is tremendous, and it had become quite a good school by the time he was done. And of course, those 36 years were not easy. He guided the school through 2 world wars and a Great Depression. He was much beloved, very well respected. His successor, Larry Gould, also, he was much loved. He was full of charisma and things, but students could think of him as Larry. Nobody thought of Donald Cowling as Don or Donald. It was Dr. Cowling. But he had many gifts. He was a terrific fundraiser, a terrific speaker, and had a way of convincing people who didn't necessarily know that they wanted to give large gifts to Carleton College that, in fact, they did. And so he just did a terrific job. He was not American born. He was born in Cornwall, which some claim is a completely different animal than England. Cornwall's very distinctive in a lot of ways. His family came to the U.S. When he was quite a young age. But I do, I recommend the Donald Cowling biography book. It's got some nice pictures. It's good information. He was a rock of stability, and the college went on, and through all of these crises, sort of proud of their leadership, and he was a reassuring presence, I think, to everybody. By the time he's facing the last of those crises, World War II, I mean, he's been in office for so long. It's hard to imagine. At the time, it was hard for people to imagine the college without him. But that he was there was a reassuring thing. Oh, everything's going to be fine. Dr. Cowling wouldn't let it be otherwise.
Eric also sent Max's family a copy of the biography about Dr. Donald J. Cowling, which I was then able to give them when we met in person. And with that, I'm actually going to have Stephanie to grab something, because we actually had Eric send us, as a gift, the book.
Oh, cool. Oh, very cool.
Yeah, that's neat.
And so now you'll get to read all about it.
So this would have been my great uncle.
Yep.
Correct.
He was Bertha's
Brother. Bertha and Robert would graduate together in 1911, with Bertha moving back to Pennsylvania and Robert staying in Minnesota. Eric sent me some amazing photos related to Bertha and Robert's time at Carleton, which the family really enjoyed. Here we have the graduating class photo. Now can you pick them out?
Great. That's
Are they there in
great.
the front? No.
No. Let's see.
Well, yeah.
All the way to the left in front?
That's,
Maybe?
Not quite.
Right above the man. Second row.
ah, okay.
1911, if they would have had that many women.
Yeah,
brothers.
I'm surprised there's so many women.
Now, do you see her brother at all? I know it's probably going to be harder to figure
Yeah,
out.
because I don't remember what he looked like.
There's Leroy.
Oh, actually, okay.
But while she was at Carleton, she was also involved in some extracurricular activities, including the Delta Phi Society. Now, can you pick her out in here, especially after you've seen 2 photos of her?
It's almost overwhelming to be able they all
Yeah.
they don't smile.
Oh, yeah.
A homely bunch,
all the
aren't
way
they?
to the
That
left.
dear lady on the back row all the way to the end.
Yeah.
Is that her?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
her.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I love the man. What a character he is.
Yes, yes, yes.
He looks like he should belong in Mary Poppins as one of the old bankers.
Yeah, but
He was photoshopped in.
Now, to continue our theme of really cool pictures, do you recognize anyone in this photograph of the 1910 Carleton football team?
Well, it won't be Bertha. It will be that guy.
That's the other lady.
It'd have been the house mother. It was the house
I'm
mother.
guessing it's Leroy.
Yep, it's Leroy.
Powers of deduction.
Is he the one second on the left in? No.
Yeah, no, you're
yeah,
right.
that is.
Good call.
Good call, Steph.
In 1917, Bertha began to work as a teacher in the Scottdale, Pennsylvania school system. She would spend most of her life working as a school teacher, as well as volunteering her time for various groups and committees connected to the Church of the United Brethren. In January 1941, Bertha became sick and was admitted to the hospital, undergoing surgery just a few days later. After a few weeks of recovery in the hospital, she was doing a bit better and went back home, but Bertha would unfortunately pass away not much later on March 29, 1941, in Scottdale, where she is now buried. Bertha never married, and no other children were identified in this research. Now that we had identified and confirmed Bertha Cowling as Robert's biological mother, it was now time to identify Robert's biological father. Since we had DNA results from the entire family, I was able to do some advanced genetic genealogy techniques. First, I downloaded the raw data files from MyHeritage for Max, his siblings, and his parents, to then upload to various other databases such as Family Tree DNA and GEDmatch. Since Max and his siblings had tested, I could do an advanced technique known as visual phasing. This allows me to determine what parts of each chromosome were inherited from which grandparent, allowing me to isolate DNA matches from the maternal grandfather Robert. Since we had DNA matches from Bertha's side to then compare, I was able to then make clusters of matches who were most likely related through Robert's biological father. Each cluster presumably having a shared ancestor that all of those matches share with each other, as well as Max's family. This allowed me to identify a cluster of matches who all linked to a family in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, known as the McNatt family. I soon found that Uniontown was only 18 miles away from Scottdale, which is where Bertha lived. Using a tool known as What Are the Odds, or WADO, a tool to help predict the relationship connection with DNA matches, I plugged in these DNA matches to determine the most likely hypothesis of how Max's grandfather Robert fit into the McNatt family tree. The most likely scenario was that Robert is the grandson of John Edward McNatt and Sarah Elizabeth Cole. So, one of their sons was likely Robert's biological father. But only one son could be a possibility, a man named Charles Edward McNatt. But something just seemed off. I found no DNA connections to the Cole family, and the shared matching amounts between the family members seemed odd. So I kept researching and trying to figure out a way to either prove or disprove this McNatt connection. I even located descendants of Charles Edward McNatt and tried to reach out to see if they would do DNA testing, but unfortunately I just wasn't able to get any responses. But as I was going through this process, Robert's birth certificate finally arrived, and the name listed under father was quite surprising. The name was Fuller Neighbors from Uniontown, Pennsylvania, which instantly stood out because Uniontown was where the McNatt family lived. I then built out Fuller Neighbors' family tree and discovered two important things. One, Fuller Neighbors was related to Charles Edward McNatt in two ways, as a first cousin once removed and as a second cousin once removed, explaining why the DNA seemed to be pointing to Charles while also seeming to be somewhat off. And the second important thing, and more importantly, Fuller Neighbors was married to Bertha Cowling's sister, Lillian Estella Cowling. This was especially interesting because it fit with the story Max's family had heard about there being an affair with the biological father and the father's sister-in-law.
Now the big question I think we all have though is, who is Fuller Neighbors? Because name for father, Fuller Neighbors, born in Uniontown, PA, and then occupation, a marble worker. So not quite lining up with what you
No,
told.
not an Oxford professor.
Maybe he was doing the marble work at Oxford.
Now, while not everything you were told was correct, some of what you were told was correct. And to actually figure out who Fuller Neighbors was, we need to go back to the Cowling family tree. Can anyone find where Fuller Neighbors is?
Oh, the husband of Lillian.
Uh-oh. Correct.
Okay, so it was goings on, right?
It was goings on. It was something between Bertha
Lillian.
and her brother-in-law through her older sister Lillian.
I'm just glad we didn't find out that it was her actual brother.
Yeah.
But I wanted to know if this was truly the case. While we had the DNA through the McNatt family, which seemed to be evidence that Fuller Neighbors was the father, there was still a possibility that he was listed for some other reason, and maybe it was a whole other McNatt family member that might be the true biological father. Basically, I want to keep in mind every possibility. So my next goal was to find DNA matches to Pam who were relatives through Fuller Neighbors' father's side because the McNatts were on Fuller Neighbors' mother's side. I quickly found a top match to Pam who was a relative through the neighbor's side, as well as multiple more distant matches through Fuller Neighbors' paternal side, thus confirming that Fuller Neighbors was Robert's biological father.
Now, once again, we turned the DNA just to confirm everything. And since we already knew a bunch of McNatts, we wanted to see could we find a DNA match on the neighbor's side, Fuller Smith's father's side. We were able to. Here we have a match. Smith Fuller Neighbors' grandfather Aaron had a brother Abraham, and this DNA match descends from Abraham, thus confirming that they truly are the parents.
Interesting. Okay. I wish Daddy could have seen that.
Smith Fuller Neighbors was born August 16, 1882 in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, to William Henry Neighbors and Rachel J. Matthews. For generations, the family seemed to be mostly farmers, but sometime in the late 1870s, Fuller Neighbors' father would get a job working for the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. The B&O had recently built tracks going straight through Uniontown, and Fuller Neighbors would grow up right near them. Many family members would end up working for the B&O Railroad, including Fuller Smith Neighbors, who would work as a telegraph operator, moving from various stations throughout western Pennsylvania. On July 18, 1908, Smith Fuller Neighbors married Lillian Estella Cowling, but any celebration was short-lived because less than a week later, Smith Fuller was arrested for running what was known as a bucket shop, a scheme that was basically margin trading using telegraph tickers for stocks, but it would largely be a scam that would end up costing the people who bought stocks through the shop. Smith Fuller Neighbors was arrested after a man named Guilford Hatfield Kierstead went to the police because he had lost $250 in a single day. The trial was pushed to September 8th, at which point Smith Fuller made a plea of no defense, although I couldn't find anything indicating the actual sentence. Just a few weeks later, Smith Fuller Neighbors and Lillian Estella Cowling's first daughter, Helen Louise Neighbors, was born on September 26, 1908 in Uniontown. Their second daughter, Pauline Ruth Neighbors, would be born January 16, 1911, also in Uniontown. An interesting note, Helen and Pauline are 3/4 siblings to Max's grandfather, Robert. This means they are half-siblings and first cousins to each other. Half-siblings through their father and first cousins through their mothers. In 1913, Smith Fuller Neighbors started the Gallatin Construction Company with his brother and a starting capital of $5,000. The business was quite successful, with many ads running in the newspapers throughout the years. Not long after starting his business, Smith Fuller Neighbors would soon start to get into local politics. He was appointed as a registrar in September 1916, then being appointed as the minority inspector of elections just a month later. In 1929, he decided to run on the Republican ticket for Uniontown City Council, running multiple campaign ads in the newspapers. While he would lose the vote for City Council, Smith Fuller would continue working in the public sector through various positions and appointments, including a brief stint on the Uniontown City Council when he was appointed to fill a vacancy in 1936. Smith Fuller Neighbors' wife, Lillian Cowling, would pass away on December 6, 1940 in the family home. During Thanksgiving in 1949, Smith Fuller became sick due to heart issues and would die just a week later on December 2, 1949, just 4 days before the 9th year anniversary of Lillian's death. Smith Fuller Neighbors was then buried in Sylvan Heights Cemetery in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, next to his wife Lillian. We don't know what the nature of the relationship was between Smith Fuller Neighbors and Bertha Cowling, and we may never know. It's also uncertain if anyone in the family even knew about them, or even if they knew that Bertha had given birth to a son out in Philadelphia. But I think one of the biggest questions that I'm still left pondering, did Lillian have any idea? Did she know what was going on between her sister and her husband? Bertha and Lillian would continue to see each other many times throughout the rest of their lives. They would visit each other a lot and even vacation together. But even if we never learn the true story of Bertha Cowling and Smith Fuller Neighbors' relationship, we at least now have identified Max's grandfather's biological parents. And while I'd uncovered this unknown part of the family tree, there was still a lot more I had found on Max's family.
Is because you have a cousin who's a YouTuber that also descends from him, Mr. Beat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I am enclosing what I understand to be the desired proof of relationship and age so that I may be entitled to receive my son's insurance. Just a broken-hearted mother. Oh.
Yes!
No pirates, but one murderer, right?
I don't want to hear anything about my white-collar guy.
If you enjoyed this video and want to see another episode where I trace another YouTuber's family tree, be sure to check out this video right here. Thank you to my Patreon patrons and YouTube members.